This presentation is for Information Studies 410, Assessment 9, answering questions about client-server systems and web-based databases. One advantage of client-server systems is improved security. Could this also be a disadvantage? In my experience, improved security always comes with downsides, though the benefits nearly always outweigh the negatives. One downside is that the improved security usually means more maintenance activity in terms of user access and delete requests and maintenance of the rights within the central system. With organizations that are just starting out with security, this often adds the necessity of extra staff for management of that security and delays and extra steps to get access to the information within the system. For example, in the old mode of a spreadsheet on a file server, once a new user was on the file system, all it took was directing them to the location of the spreadsheet and they were ready to go. In the new system, there might be an access form to fill out and a turnaround time of a couple days, or even more, for the request to be completed. This might seem like a hassle to some, but a client-server system provides so many benefits, it is almost certainly a small price to pay. As with any project, the most important thing is to evaluate the needs of the business and determine whether the system warrants the extra security. A disadvantage of client-server systems is a single point of failure. What does this mean? A single point of failure means that a failure in one part of the system would render it entirely unusable for all users. This is usually not as much of a problem in, for example, a distributed database because the different distributions of the system are able to continue operating locally even when they lose connectivity with the central database. In a client-server database, if there is a power failure or a network failure in the data center where the server is maintained, no one is able to use the system. Which situations would you want to ensure that some type of backup system was in place? All systems should have data backups, but not all systems require fully functional backup systems. It will always be dependent on the needs of the business in every case. For example, if this is not a core business system needed every day by the business, like a data warehouse that is only needed for monthly reports, backing up the data so that it can be restored if necessary may be sufficient. One example that I've had in my own personal work background is a content management system used by many areas. Since most of the original users were daily users but worked normal workdays, having 24/7 availability of their operating procedures was not a necessity. But when the help desk transitioned their content to the CMS, it suddenly became an urgent necessity because the help desk operates 24/7 and needs to be able to look up procedures for the most obscure systems within the organization, even if, perhaps especially if, the network is having issues. In this case, a backup system is crucial. What is scalability? Scalability is the ability of a system to expand or scale down as needed while still performing all necessary functions within reasonable expectations. One example you might run into is high-traffic online retail sites that increase their hardware for traffic capacity for the holiday shopping season, and then after the shopping season it slows down, reallocate that hardware elsewhere within the organization to be put to better use. What is a back-end processor? A back-end processor performs important system functions on the server end, invisible to the end user. Often this includes the actual calculations and transactions needed within the system on the database end. For example, the back-end processor runs the queries, calculations, and transactions on the server when they are requested by the user from the front-end interface. What is a front-end processor? A front-end processor is a computer, typically the user's computer, that performs system functionality on its end. In most cases, this is going to involve the display of the system's interface or personalization settings. For example, cookie settings in the user's browser might store how many search results the user wants to display at one time. Another example is the resizing of a web page when the user is on a tablet and switches from portrait to landscape view. Have you ever used Google Docs to share documents? Have you used any other internet services to share files? I've used Google Docs extensively and find it to be one of the most useful interactive document sharing systems available. The fact that you can see the changes other users are making while they're making them is a new paradigm for document sharing. Other document sharing options I've used, like Evernote and Dropbox, are not so transparent in that matter. They operate separate instances of the document and resolve document conflicts when you close. In addition, sending a link to a document is easiest in Google Docs and Dropbox. Evernote is a little more complicated. What can the client-side scripting languages such as JavaScript and VBScript do? Client-side scripting languages can allow for faster processing of functionality that can be run on the user end without interaction with the server. Typically, these functions are display-related, but other use cases exist as well. One example you might run into is drop-down menus, which would be much slower if all processing happened on the server end instead of the browser or client end. Development frameworks and server-side extensions provide predefined tools that aid in development work, including templates and reusable components, as well as processes that keep the project moving. This allows developers to work within the same context and know what to expect right away, even if they're new to the company or the project. One example you might run into of a template is logon or authorization functions, which are likely to be used in many different systems. So a template that provides code would require only minor tweaks to fit the environment and would be very useful as a result.